Welcome back to the deep dive. Imagine two incredible initiatives, both starting with real passion, loads of talent, a powerful message. One sparks this global movement, just changes lives everywhere. The other, it flares up, looks great for a year maybe, then kind of fizzles out. What's the hidden difference there? Today, we're plunging right into that mystery, the unexpected secret behind really lasting impact.
It's a great question. And what our sources are really pointing to is that the secret ingredient, it isn't just like charismatic leadership or a really compelling vision on its own. It's this hidden engine of field-proven teams built to reproduce themselves.
Yeah.
And that's not just a minor tweak, It's actually a pretty profound paradigm shift.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly what that paradigm shift actually means. We're talking about moving from seeing teams as, permanent fixtures, whose main goal is just gathering people.
Right.
And shifting to understanding them as these dynamic engines designed specifically to multiply and spark, dozens of new initiatives. So the real goal isn't just planting something, but reproducing teams that then reproduce entire movements. That distinction really does flip things, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah. We're often conditioned to think, bigger buildings, more resources, growing attendance, that those are the only marks of success. But what if success actually means intentionally shrinking your core team sometimes? Sending out your best people, knowing that act of sacrifice. Well, that's the true engine of exponential impact.
Wow.
That's the radical redefinition we're digging into. And the stakes, well, they're high. If we don't grasp this, we risk stagnant growth, totally overburdened leaders, and just missed opportunities to truly spread the vision. But the reward,
it's huge.
it's a self-sustaining network. Local leaders equipped to carry the vision forward themselves. This shift from just building to actively reproducing, it feels incredibly timely.
Why timely?
Well, because the landscape has really moved beyond that old one pastor, one church kind of model. Now it's more about agile, catalytic movements that can spread organically,
Okay, that makes sense. So if this multiplication idea is so critical, where does it even come from? Let's dive into its roots.
They're surprising, right?
They really are. It's actually woven into the very fabric of existence, you could say. Right from the start, Genesis chapter 1, the divine mandate is explicitly reproductive. When God creates, the instruction is, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So multiplication isn't just like an outcome. It's presented as an inherent act of divine generosity, a desire to bless and see life just flourish and spread.
And that thread continues, doesn't it? Jesus himself picks up this theme. I'm thinking of the parable of the seed and the sower.
Exactly.
He talks about the seed, the message, the word, having this intrinsic power. But then crucially, he highlights how the environment, the community that receives it, that determines the yield. It beautifully shows that healthy growth isn't forced. It cultivates the conditions for natural, organic spread. That's a great way to put it. And what's fascinating is how this applies so directly to how mission happened in the early days. Biblical mission, it was rarely a solo gig. Think about it. Paul, Barnabas, Timothy, Luke, and Loan, you almost always see them operating in teams. Our sources describe these almost like divine swarms.
Divine swarms, I like that.
Yeah. Agile adaptive units, often sent out from a central hub like Antioch, which we read about in Acts. Their strength wasn't in one person, but in their unity, their diverse gifts, and that shared vision.
Okay, a divine swarm, great image. So what actually makes a swarm healthy? Not just existing, but ready to, expand and replicate.
Well, a healthy swarm, it has several key characteristics. First, there's a shared vision and identity. And this isn't just like a mission statement on paper. It's a deep common commitment to Christ and the mission.
Yeah.
Like Paul urged the Philippians, stand firm in one spirit, contending as one. It's that single-minded focus.
But unity sounds foundational.
It is. Second, there's a profound interdependence of gifts. Each member brings something distinct, teaching, encouragement, practical help, mercy, you name it. It's not about everyone being the same. It's the diversity of strengths that makes the team adaptable, like a really good sports team. Different players, different roles, one goal. Paul talks about this in Romans.
Right, everyone plays their part. And you need to keep bringing new talent into the game, too, yeah?
Exactly. That's the third point. They're focused on multiplying leaders. These teams operate with open hands, constantly releasing and empowering others. Paul telling Timothy to entrust these things to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. That's a blueprint for a chain reaction of leadership, 4 generations deep.
Wow.
And finally, there's contextual fluidity. Just like a real swarm adapts to the wind, these teams learn to adapt it to local language, culture, social rhythms. So the message connects authentically. It doesn't feel foreign.
That makes so much sense. And we actually see this playing out in some powerful historical examples, don't we?
We do. Take Antioch, the sending hub. In Acts, you see this diverse group of believers gathering, worshiping, and then, led by the Spirit through prophets, they commissioned Barnabas and Saul to go out. The key insight. The sending church invested in multiplication. They released their strongest leaders instead of hoarding them.
That takes courage.
It does. And then there's Philippi, Paul's team. They get jailed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even there, their interactions with Lydia and the jailer lead to a new church being born in a really hostile place. It shows how these teams can thrive even in the toughest spots, driven by prayer and, well, sheer guts.
Incredible. A church born in a prison cell. Which brings us back to that term, field-proven. What does it really mean for a team to be so field-proven they can handle something like that?
Right. When we talk about field-proven teams, we're talking about that hidden engine behind movements that last. These aren't just, randomly assembled groups, however passionate. Our sources say they are forged in spiritual fire, shaped by trial, and refined by obedience. Think of it like a tech startup that's actually survived its first few years.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't just had a good idea. They've tested it, faced real problems, adapted. These teams have been through the messy reality of ministry and emerged stronger, with a depth that goes way beyond just initial excitement.
So it sounds like it's about more than just good intentions or even raw talent. Let's dig into the biblical DNA of multiplicative teams some more. First off, God's strategy seems to have always been team-based, right? From Genesis 1, let us make man in our image. It's collaborative from the start.
Mm.
And Jesus, in the Great Commission, he doesn't send out individuals. He commissions disciples as a team to go and make disciples of all nations. The divine plan is teams, not lone wolves.
Spot on. And Jesus didn't just command it, he modeled it. He took radically different people, fishermen, tax collectors, zealots, and formed them into this mobile, hands-on training group. He sent them out 2 by 2, Mark tells us. Not to keep them close, but specifically aiming for reproduction. His whole method was about multiplication.
So to really nail down what makes a team field-proven, what are those defining characteristics?
Okay, first, they are absolutely battle-tested in real ministry contexts. Their credibility isn't theoretical. It's earned in the dirt through facing hardship, fatigue, complexity, like Paul's team getting jailed before the Philippian church started. Field-proven isn't about being perfect. It's about perseverance. Resilience.
Okay.
Second, there's this spirit-formed chemistry and covenants, more than just skills lining up. It's that deep relational unity, submitting to one another, discerning the spirits leading together. It makes them a real covenant community,
right.
like a tight-knit military unit where trust is everything.
Got it.
And third, they have mission clarity combined with contextual agility. They know what they're about, but they're flexible on the how. They learn to adapt the message without watering it down. Paul becoming all things to all people in Corinth is the classic example of this.
This all keeps pointing back to what we called the swarm effect, reproduction over retention. Healthy teams just naturally reproduce. They plant churches that plant more churches. It's like that mustard seed parable, isn't it? Starts tiny, grows into this whole ecosystem.
Exactly. A healthy church plant, that's great. But it's not the ultimate goal in this model, a multiplying movement. That's the true measure of success.
Okay, this is where Paul's ministry in Ephesus becomes really interesting, right? Because it wasn't just another church plant. It seems like a major shift for him, a turning point from just leading a team to really multiplying a movement.
Ephesus was absolutely key. It was a huge third largest city in the Roman Empire, a major center for commerce, culture, religion. If you made an impact there, it echoed across the whole region. And notice, unlike his usual quick visits, Paul stays in Ephesus for 3 years. Acts tells us this. Why? To anchor a movement, not just start one church.
Right, so it shifted from ministry in Ephesus to ministry from Ephesus. How did he actually do that?
The pivotal element seems to be the Hall of Tyrannus. Paul taught there daily for 2 whole years. This wasn't just preaching to crowds, it was intensive, focused discipleship. He was training a core group of leaders, and the result was astounding. Acts says all the residents of Asia heard the word of the Lord, not because Paul went everywhere himself.
But because the leaders he trained did.
Exactly. Ephesus became this strategic launchpad for the entire region.
That's brilliant. And this directly fueled the rise of indigenous leaders, didn't it? We see people like Timothy, who Paul mentored and actually stationed back in Ephesus later, and Epaphras, who likely trained there and then went and planted the church in Colossae.
Yes, these were leaders shaped for strategic responsibility, ready to carry the mission into their own contexts without Paul having to be physically present all the time.
And Paul's method of apostolic oversight without control seems crucial here, too. After he left, he didn't just disappear. He stayed connected through letters, sent team members back, revisited himself sometimes, like when he met with the Ephesian elders.
Right. It was relational oversight, based on trust, mutual responsibility. Not heavy-handed control, but not abandonment either. Kind of like maybe a venture capitalist guiding a startup they've invested in, offering wisdom, resources, but letting them run the show.
That connection local leaders empowered, but still connected regionally, feels vital. And it makes me wonder, how deep does this idea of networks run in our faith? Is it just a strategy or something more fundamental?
Oh, it's fundamental. God's vision seems to always involve expansion through empowerment. From Eden, meant to spread, to Abraham's call to bless all nations. Paul's Ephesus strategy just reflects that ancient pattern by decentralizing the mission. And then you have the body of Christ as a distributed network. Ephesians 4 talks about apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, their job, equipping the saints for the work of ministry.
So the focus is on empowering everyone, not just a few leaders.
Exactly. Equipping over monopolizing. The church isn't meant to be just one big institution in one place, but this living, interconnected network spreading through every community. A bit like the internet, maybe decentralized, connected nodes everywhere.
So let's bring this home. For someone listening today, what are the practical takeaways from this Ephesus model?
Okay, first big one. Stop centralizing. Start catalyzing. The model urges us to build regional strength, not just institutional dependency. If you're leading, aim to catalyze leaders in multiple places. Equip regional teams to reproduce in their own context. Build relational networks based on shared vision, not just uniform methods.
And number 2, prioritize equipping over executing. This is huge. Instead of burning yourself out doing all the ministry, focus on creating training environments. Shift from being the main speaker or doer to being an equipper, an apprentice maker. Embed leadership development into the everyday rhythm.
And thirdly, think regionally, not just locally. Ask yourself, how could my church or organization become an Ephesus for its area? This means spotting potential leaders in nearby towns, maybe smaller communities, unreached groups. Invest in them deeply, then commission them outward. Not to clone your thing, but to embody the mission right where they are.
The results of Paul's work in Ephesus are just so compelling, aren't they? Within a decade, Asia Minor is filled with these vibrant faith communities, Colossae, Laodicea, Smyrna, all those churches in Revelation. And the amazing thing is, Paul didn't personally plant most of them.
No, they were planted by the people he equipped and sent out from Ephesus. It really drives home the point. The true measure of impact isn't just the crowd under your roof, it's how many leaders you release to build and multiply across a whole region.
That's such a powerful shift in thinking. It makes me want to understand the actual mechanics of team multiplication. How does this move from being an idea to being something baked into how a team operates?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? In what we're calling movemental Christianity, the key insight is, it is not the church that multiplies first. It is the team. The primary goal becomes planting other teams and leaders who then become planters themselves. It's like designing a seed that contains within it the ability to produce more seed-bearing plants. Exponential by design.
So it's not just about one leader or even one church community planting another. It's about this reproducing core, right? Just like Jesus showed with his disciples, training them specifically for reproduction.
Exactly.
And Paul, you called him the master of the reproducing team. That 4-generation blueprint he gave Timothy. Paul trains Timothy. Timothy trains reliable leaders. Those leaders train others. It's a chain reaction designed to spread.
Precisely. And the mechanics, how you actually do that. It's about reproduction from the inside out. Firstly, through internal apprenticeship. This means every single team member sees themselves as a trainer. They're doing 2 things at once. Doing the ministry work and actively training someone else to do it.
Like the watch me, do it with me, now you do it model.
Okay, that cycle, watch me, do it with me, you do it while I watch. And then the crucial step, go do it and train someone else. It builds reproduction right into the team's daily life.
That sounds incredibly practical, learning by doing, but very intentionally.
Very intentional. Secondly, there's cross-training and gift-based equipping. This isn't about making everyone a clone. It's about identifying and developing diverse gifts across the team, fostering interdependence, prevents bottlenecks, leverages everyone's strengths, like Paul talks about the body needing all its different parts.
Makes sense. You need a deep bench.
You do. Thirdly, field exposure is absolutely critical. Training has to happen in the real world, not just a classroom. Paul took Timothy on the road for a reason, to see the mess and the glory of mission firsthand. New leaders need real responsibility, delegated authority, and, importantly, a safe space to try things and even, fail forward a bit.
Okay, and then that final step, releasing them.
Yes, releasing with intentional support. This is crucial. It's not just saying good luck. It's sending them out with clear vision alignment, maintaining strong relational connection, and providing strategic resources or coaching as needed. Paul didn't just dump Timothy in Ephesus. He supported him through letters, visits, ongoing mentorship.
This really leads to a radical reframing of success, doesn't it? You mentioned when your best people leave. In most organizations, that feels like a disaster.
Right, a crisis. But in these multiplying movements, sending out your best, most capable people is actually the ultimate sign of success. The goal shifts from hoarding talent to planting legacy. True fruitfulness isn't measured by who stays with you, but by who leaves well to lead others in planting, discipling, multiplying somewhere else. It's like a successful university proud of its alumni's achievements out in the world.
That's a huge mental shift. And the theological undertones here are pretty deep too, aren't they? This whole idea of team multiplication, it feels almost Trinitarian.
It really does. You see this pattern. The Father sends the Son sends the Spirit empowers and sends the church. We're essentially mirroring that divine strategy. Reproduction happens through relationship, movement grows through mission, transformation spreads through trust. It seems baked into the very nature of God.
Wow. Okay, this leads us to maybe the toughest part for many leaders. That act of releasing the work. You called it the most difficult, yet maybe the most divine act of leadership. Why is that?
It truly is a crucible. Our sources describe it as the highest expression of trust, mirroring, as you said, the very character of God. Think about it. God gave Adam and Eve real freedom in the garden, the freedom to obey or disobey. He risked their failure for the sake of genuine relationship and responsibility.
Yeah.
And Jesus, after pouring 3 years into his disciples, he hands over the entire global mission to them, flawed as they were. So real authority, biblical authority, isn't ultimately proven by how tightly you hold on to control, but by how effectively you pass it on. It's like maybe a master craftsman training an apprentice, not just to copy, but to eventually surpass them.
So why is it so hard for leaders to actually do that? I can imagine the emotional pull is strong.
It's incredibly strong. First, there's deep emotional attachment. You pour your heart, soul, sweat into building something. It feels like an extension of you. Letting go can feel like giving away a part of yourself. Then there's the fear of failure or deviation, the big what if. What if they mess up? What if they change things? What if they don't do it my way? Leaders have to wrestle with trusting the people they've raised up and ultimately trusting the Spirit in them.
That's a big one.
It is. And finally, there's identity confusion. For many leaders, their role is their identity. I am the founder. I am the lead pastor. Releasing significant control over the work can trigger an identity crisis. It requires deep spiritual maturity to remember the work belongs to the mission, ultimately to God, not to us personally.
So, okay, given those challenges, what's the practical biblical way to release well? How do you release without just abandoning people or the vision?
Great question. Firstly, prepare long before you let go. Jesus didn't suddenly hand over the keys. He spent 3 years intentionally preparing the 12, teaching, modeling, correcting, empowering. Release should be the culmination of a long process, not an abrupt event. Secondly, shift from control to oversight. Look at Paul's model again. After planting, he didn't micromanage. He provided oversight through letters, visits, sending trusted delegates like Timothy and Titus. It's like being a mentor or a coach, offering wisdom and support, not dictating every move.
Okay.
Thirdly, actively celebrate their voice, not just yours. Remember John the Baptist. He must increase, but I must decrease. Mature leaders find joy in championing the next generation, even when it means stepping out of the spotlight themselves. And finally, trust the Spirit over systems. Good structures are helpful, essential even. But ultimately, the release has to be an act of faith in trusting the people you've discipled and the work itself to the leading and power of the Holy Spirit. Think of Antioch sending off Barnabas and Saul in Acts 13. It was a Spirit-led act of trust.
This all sounds very much like intentional succession planning. Our sources actually call that the heartbeat of sustained movements.
It absolutely is, and we see it all through Scripture. Elijah passing the mantle to Elisha, Paul investing so heavily in Timothy and Titus, and of course, Jesus preparing the 12 to carry on his mission. The key elements of this kind of biblical succession planning seem to be intentional identification, actively looking for potential leaders, strategic mentorship, not just talk, but real ministry experience alongside a mentor, gradual transfer of authority, increasing responsibility in phases, cultural blessing and affirmation, public recognition and endorsement, and ongoing legacy support. The outgoing leader remains available for wisdom but doesn't interfere.
And this connects to another fascinating idea from the sources, strategic hive-offs, described as when growth looks like departure. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. A hive-off isn't like a church split caused by conflict. It's intentional replication that happens from maturity and strength. Think of a healthy beehive becoming large enough to send out a queen and a portion of the bees to start a completely new colony.
Okay.
Antioch in Acts 13 is the prime example. The church was thriving, diverse, spirit-filled. And from that strength, the Spirit prompted them to send out two of their very best leaders, Barnabas and Saul, to start something new. This kind of strategic hive-off requires deep discernment. It has to be Spirit-initiated, not just human ambition. It takes courage. You're sending your strongest, not your weakest. And it involves sacrifice. There's a cost to the sending community, but you trust it's a seed that will bear much fruit, like Jesus said in John 12. The mother team nurtures leaders and then intentionally launches them, crucially transferring real authority before they even leave.
So let's pivot slightly. How does all this translate into empowering local ownership, especially across cultures? This idea of national integration, moving beyond external support to genuine local leadership for multiplication that lasts.
Right, this is critical for long-term, sustainable impact. And again, the roots are biblical. God's promise to Abraham was that all nations would be blessed through him. Pentecost was like the first integration laboratory, with people hearing the gospel in their own languages. And Paul's whole approach of contextual apostleship, becoming all things to all people, wasn't about compromise. It was about ensuring local leaders could eventually lead effectively within their own cultural context. That's like a good global company. They have core principles, but they empower local managers to adapt to their specific market.
So why is this national integration or local ownership so vital?
Well, first, it breaks the cycle of dependency. Initiatives led only by outsiders often struggle to become truly self-sustaining. Second, it builds relevance and resilience. Indigenous leaders understand the nuances of their culture far better, allowing the message or mission to connect more deeply and withstand local challenges. And fundamentally, it honors the image of God in people from every nation and culture. It says, we trust you, we value your insights, you are equipped to lead in your own context.
How do these field-proven teams we've been talking about actually help foster this integration? What do they do?
They make it a priority from day one. This means actively identifying potential local leaders early on. It means intentionally transferring roles and responsibilities over time. It involves ensuring major decisions are made with significant local input, or entirely by local leaders eventually. And it includes working towards financial and structural independence for the local initiative. The goal is always to empower the local expression to thrive on its own.
The sources also mention some principles of humble integration. Things like adopting a learner posture, celebrating local expressions, outsiders shifting to support roles, and maintaining connection without dominance. That seems key.
Absolutely key. Humility is essential. This also brings up an important caution. Avoiding identity in team structure. Structures are necessary tools, but they can easily become idols if we're not careful. Paul warned the Corinthians about identifying too strongly with specific leaders. I follow Paul. I follow Apollos. The focus must remain on Christ. And remember the church in Laodicea in Revelation. They seemed proud of their self-sufficiency, their structure, but were spiritually lukewarm. Structures must serve the mission, not become a substitute for genuine spirit-filled life.
That's a great point. Ultimately, it seems empowering local ownership is the very pulse of reproducible growth, fostering indigenous leadership so the work thrives under its own steam. We see it with Moses passing the baton to Joshua, Paul entrusting Timothy.
There's a wonderful modern example shared in the sources about Hannah's rural church. An outside team initially mentored Hannah. She started co-leading. Over time, she and her husband took full pastoral leadership of their local community gathering. It then became a hub, influencing other nearby villages, the original planting team. They gracefully shifted into a supportive partnership role, praying, advising when asked, but no longer driving. That's a beautiful picture of successful integration and local ownership.
It really is. Okay, so let's try to pull all these threads together. It sounds like the ultimate goal is building a culture of team multiplication. shifting the entire mindset from building static monuments to birthing dynamic movements. Our sources suggest 5 key pillars for cultivating this culture. What are they?
Okay, first pillar, start with a team vision that explicitly includes multiplication from the very beginning. Everyone on the team needs clarity that the goal isn't just to plant one successful thing, but to be part of planting a movement of reproducing teams.
Makes sense. Get it in the DNA early. What's second?
Second, create an apprentice pathway. There needs to be a clear, understandable process for how someone grows from being an observer to a participant, then to a trainer of others, and potentially to becoming a planter or leader of a new team themselves. It demystifies leadership development.
Okay, number 3.
Third, normalize mobility. This is about culture change. Sending your best people out shouldn't feel like a crisis or a loss. It needs to become a celebrated, expected pattern. Maybe through regular commissioning moments, prayers for those being sent. It reframes departure as a launch, a success.
Love that.
Fourth, tell the stories. Nothing shapes culture like powerful narratives. Regularly share testimonies of leaders who have been sent out, the new things they're starting, the challenges, the breakthroughs. Stories inspire and instruct way more effectively than just policies.
So true. And the 5th pillar?
Fifth, track generations. If multiplication is genuinely the goal, you have to measure it somehow. This means shifting focus from just counting current attendance or members to tracking the generational depth of leadership and new initiatives. Are the people you trained, training others, or the teams you launching new teams. That's the metric for a movement.
Wow. So these 5 pillars, team vision, apprentice pathway, normalized mobility, telling stories, tracking generations, they create a specific kind of environment, right?
Exactly. It fosters true ownership. Overemployment people feel like vision carriers, not just employees. It embraces risk as rhythm sending and planting becomes a normal, anticipated part of the team's life cycle. It ensures sustainability over survival because the movement relies on DNA passed down, not just the charisma of one leader. And crucially, it's rooted in spiritual DNA, not cultural copy, allowing the core vision to take root and flourish authentically in diverse new contexts.
What an incredible journey we've taken today. From re-examining success to diving into biblical models and practical mechanics. It really is a profound shift, moving from building for permanence to embracing perpetuation, from centralizing control to intentionally empowering multiplication. It changes everything.
It really does. The vision we've unpacked today is about cultivating, you could say, an orchard of faith, where every tree is healthy enough and designed to bear fruit that contains seeds for more trees. That's how you get exponential expansion. Legacy becomes about the DNA you pass along, not just the resume you leave behind.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to mull over. What part of your current leadership, your ministry, your work, are you perhaps still holding on to just a little too tightly? Maybe fearing its loss or fearing change, when perhaps God or the mission itself is actually calling you to release it for a greater multiplying harvest you haven't even imagined yet.
Yeah, and maybe ask yourself, are you building primarily for what you can see and manage right now? Or are you intentionally building for a movement that will hopefully outlive you, carried forward powerfully by the very people you empower and send out?
Well, this deep dive, as always, is hopefully a shortcut to getting you well informed on these ideas. But the real adventure, the real impact, comes in wrestling with them and applying them in your own unique context. We definitely encourage you to continue your own deep dives into these concepts. The potential for multiplying impact is just immense.